I'll tell you why. The secretary was in a rush to cover up, to make sure that she was protecting the officers without regard for the life that was lost. And in doing this, she was violating not only this basic moral concept, she was breaking the law. The secretary should be investigated right along with those officers who were out there engaged in this ungodly conduct. She should be investigated. And in my opinion, based upon my observation, secretary should not only be investigated, the secretary should be prosecuted right along with those officers. This man did not brandish. This man was not armed. This man did not attempt to hurt those officers. They should all be prosecuted.
This may look like a heated exchange over a single incident, but it's actually a confrontation over who controls the narrative when government power is under scrutiny. What's really being tested here is whether investigative standards apply equally to career officials and political leadership. When public conclusions are drawn before formal reviews are complete, it raises broader questions about neutrality, executive authority, and institutional restraint. In this video, we'll break down how a routine oversight hearing transformed into a debate about accountability at the highest levels, and what that means for public trust in the system itself.
Back, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me now? Is it?
The microphone right there.
Well, will you give me a moment to get a bit closer, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I say it sincerely. I believe this is a most valuable hearing, and I'm honored that the ranking member would be here with us to accommodate us, as is the case with you. Mr. Lyons, is it true that you have a criminal justice degree, a bachelor's degree in criminal justice?
Yes, sir, it is.
Is it also true that you have a master's degree in criminal justice leadership?
Yes, I do.
And would you, as a professional with 2 degrees in criminal justice, indicate to us that if an officer commits murder, that officer should be prosecuted?
Sir, any law enforcement misconduct needs to be investigated and prosecuted.
Investigated and prosecuted. And have you seen the widely published video of the killing of Mr. Alex Preddy?
Yes, sir.
And sir, my assumption is that if I ask you whether this was an injustice, you would say you cannot comment because of an ongoing investigation. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
And what is the rationale for not responding to an ongoing investigation?
Sir, I don't want to impede or prejudice the investigation.
No, not this one. Any, as in your profession now, but any investigation. What's the rationale? Not this one, any.
Same for any investigation, sir. I don't want to.
You would not want to.
I don't want to bias or put my finger on the scale of any investigation.
You not. What's the rationale for your not testifying about it is my question.
I don't understand your question, sir.
What does the law say? What is the rationale? What harm would it do if you testified?
Because I don't want to have the full facts of the case yet, sir.
Exactly, that's what I expected you to say. You don't have the full facts, thank you. And I assume you would agree with this, Mr. Scott, is this true?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Edlow, you would agree?
I assume so. I'm not a professional in law enforcement.
But you're a
attorney.
professional person with a degree of intellect such that you can comment on whether or not.
Well, I certainly would not comment on anything.
Not a specific case. We're talking about now any case. Would you agree that it would cause harm for you to testify before there's an investigation?
Certainly without having all the facts.
All right, surely you would agree. Which brings us to Secretary Gnome. Secretary Gnome accused Mr. Preddy of brandishing a firearm while wishing to inflict harm on the officers. Secretary Gnome. Same rules that apply to you apply to Secretary Gnome. Accused this gentleman, Mr. Preddy, of brandishing a firearm. Secretary Gnome doing this when she did without an investigation. We have to agree that there's not been an investigation. I don't think I have to ask you that. Not a complete investigation that we know of anyway. She did it right afterwards. Having done this, she is violating this very basic principle that you have called to our attention today. And we have to ask ourselves, why would she go so far as to say brandishing when he did not? The video will clearly show it. And she said, wishing to inflict harm. Did not inflict any harm, but the secretary, without an investigation, made these comments. I'll tell you why. The secretary was in a rush to cover up, to make sure that she was protecting the officers without regard for the life that was lost. And in doing this, she was violating not only this basic moral concept, she was breaking the law. The secretary should be investigated right along with those officers who were out there engaged in this ungodly conduct. She should be investigated. And in my opinion, based upon my observation, secretary should not only be investigated, the secretary should be prosecuted right along with those officers. This man did not brandish. This man was not armed. This man did not attempt to hurt those officers. They should all be prosecuted. And you persons associated with the Trump
Gentleman's time
administration say
has
lock her
expired.
up. I say lock her up.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now
In that charged exchange, Congressman Al Green leaned forward and did something that rarely happens in the carefully measured choreography of a congressional hearing. He took the principle that every witness had just affirmed, that no one should comment on an ongoing investigation without full facts, and turned it outward, toward power itself. He began methodically, degrees in criminal justice, professional standards, the obligation to investigate and prosecute misconduct. Each answer from the witness was cautious, restrained, disciplined. I don't want to bias the investigation. I don't have the full facts. It was the language of institutional restraint, the language of due process, the language that protects the integrity of the system. And then Congressman Green pivoted. If it is improper for a witness to speculate without all the facts, if it is harmful to put a finger on the scale, if justice demands patience before judgment, then why, he asked, did Secretary Gnome speak publicly and definitively about Alex Preddy immediately after the incident? Why characterize his actions before the investigative process had run its course? Why describe intent, threat, and conduct before the evidence had been fully weighed? That was the moment. Not just a clash of rhetoric, not just a heated exchange, but a collision between principle and power. Green accused the secretary of violating the very standard that the witnesses had just articulated, the standard that protects fairness. He argued that by describing Preddy as brandishing a firearm and intending harm, she moved ahead of the investigation itself. In his view, it was not simply commentary, it was influence. It was narrative setting. It was authority shaping perception before facts were finalized. And in a democracy, perception matters. Because when a cabinet-level official speaks, those words carry weight. They ripple outward into public opinion, into the media cycle, into institutional morale. They shape how events are understood long before a courtroom ever sees evidence. This hearing was not only about one tragic incident, it was about the fragile architecture of justice. The unwritten code that those in power must exercise restraint precisely because they hold power. Green's argument rested on a moral symmetry. If law enforcement officers must be investigated when force is questioned, then public officials who shape the narrative must also be accountable for how they wield their authority. He went further. He alleged not merely impropriety, but legal violation. He called for investigation. He called for prosecution. And in a moment heavy with political symbolism, he echoed a phrase once chanted at campaign rallies: lock her up. That phrase, once aimed at political opponents, now redirected toward a sitting cabinet secretary. The room reacted. The chair cut him off. Time expired. But the words hung there. This is what congressional hearings reveal when the microphones are live and the stakes are real. Not just policy disagreements, not just partisan friction, but competing visions of accountability. One side sees premature commentary as damaging to the integrity of an investigation. The other sees public defense of officers as necessary leadership in a moment of crisis. The tension lies in the gray space between them, because justice in America depends on two things happening simultaneously: transparency and restraint. Transparency demands that officials speak. Restraint demands that they wait. When those principles collide, hearings like this become a national mirror. Green's challenge was not subtle. He suggested that the Secretary's public statements were an attempt to protect officers without full regard for the life that was lost. He framed it as moral failure, institutional failure, even legal failure. Supporters will say he was demanding accountability at the highest level. Critics will say he leapt to conclusions just as quickly as the official he criticized. And that is the paradox. In calling for prosecution, Green himself moved from inquiry to judgment, from oversight to accusation. The hearing became not only a question of what Secretary Gnome said, but how lawmakers themselves handle the power of words. Because in Washington, language is leverage. Every description carries implication. Every public statement shapes legitimacy. Every accusation, especially one made under oath and under lights, reverberates beyond the chamber. The broader political context cannot be ignored. Immigration enforcement, federal authority, and executive power remain deeply polarizing. In such an environment, even a single sentence from a cabinet official becomes ammunition in a wider battle over trust in institutions. And trust is fragile. When Americans watch these exchanges, they are not only judging policy, they are judging process. They are asking whether justice is applied evenly, whether power protects itself, whether oversight is genuine or performative. What this moment ultimately exposes is something deeper than a single confrontation. It reveals how easily principle can become weaponized, how quickly rhetoric can escalate, how thin the line is between defending due process and demanding immediate accountability. The Constitution entrusts Congress with oversight for a reason. It entrusts the executive branch with enforcement for a reason. Each must check the other. Each must guard against excess. But when emotion enters the chamber, when tragedy meets politics, restraint becomes harder. And yet it becomes more necessary than ever. This hearing will not be the final word on the Alex Preddy case. Investigations will proceed, reports will be written, decisions will be made. But the exchange we witnessed was a reminder that justice is not only about verdicts. It is about how leaders speak, how they act, how they wait. In a republic built on laws, not personalities, patience is not weakness. It is strength. Accountability must be fair. Investigations must be thorough. And power, no matter who holds it, must always answer to principle. That is the standard. That is the test. And that is the responsibility of every official sworn to serve. If you believe in transparent oversight, measured leadership, and equal accountability under the law, stay informed, stay engaged, and subscribe to Liberty Report USA as we continue to examine the moments that shape our democracy.